Welcome everybody to Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute's Lifestyle as Medicine Lecture Series. We're so excited tonight to have Julieanna Hever talking about optimizing Healthspan. I am Dr. Ted Barnett, the high-tech doctor with low-tech solutions. Some people know me as Dr. Veggie. I'm also the president and founder of Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute. These are some of our programs that we would love to have people share with their friends and healthcare acquaintances. We have two programs that are ACLM certified by the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, our own 15-day whole food plant-based jumpstart, which we give every month, and about 2,400 people have taken that so far since we've been giving it monthly since 2018. We also run the Lift Project, developed by Darren Morton in Australia. We love that. And we also have health coaching. And we'd like to tell you about our Pale Blue Dot community, which you had to get through that to sign up for this. And we'd love for you to explore a little bit there. We've developed that for you to have a friendly place to interact and to learn about plant-based nutrition, and also to help with planetary health. So we consider it the connection between human health and planetary health. And the Pale Blue Dot is, as you may or may not know, is a concept that was thought of by Carl Sagan, who was a professor at Cornell back in the 80s, and you probably have heard of him. And he came up with the idea of the Pale Blue Dot based on that famous photo that shows Earth as a single pixel. Our lecturer tonight, Julieanna Hever, the plant-based dietitian, has a BA in theater and an MS in nutrition, bridging her biggest passions for food, presenting, and helping people. She has authored 9 books, including the latest, Choose Your Now Diet, The Healthspan Solution, The Complete Idiot's Guide to Plant-Based Nutrition, and The Vegetarian Diet, plus 2 peer-reviewed journal articles on plant-based nutrition for healthcare professionals. She was the host of the Choose You Now podcast and the wellness talk show television series, What Would Julieanna Do? Julieanna gave a TEDx talk and instructed for the eCornell Plant-Based Nutrition Certification Program. She's appeared on the Dr. Oz Show, Harry, and the Steve Harvey Show. Julieanna speaks and consults with clients around the globe. You can find her at plantbaseddietitian.com. If I seem a little tired, I did work all day, so I don't have all my sparkle here. But Julieanna, can you turn on your camera, please? Julieanna, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence tonight. We're so excited to hear what you have to say. Julieanna is coming to us from Los Angeles. Say hello.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Well, it's nice to see and not see all of you out there on Zoom. I have a question for you. How many of you would like to live to be 120 years old? Now, I wish I could see your hands being raised, or not. Well, the US population is rapidly aging due to falling birth rates and rising life expectancies. According to the US Census Bureau projections, by the year 2050, 1 in 5 Americans will be 65 or older, and at least 400,000 will be 100 or older. But asked whether they personally would choose to undergo medical treatments to slow the aging process and live to be 120 or more, 56% of US adults said, no, thank you. What if the question was modified to be, would you like to live to be 120 and maintain your agility, your health, and your faculties? That changes things, right? Nobody wants to age. Ideally, we live our most healthful, vibrant, vital, cognizant selves as long as possible, enjoying love, connection, passion, joy, until we fall asleep and drift into, well, whatever comes next. So today I'm going to briefly touch on the very complex subject, answering the question, what is aging? And then we'll talk about how lifestyle and diet play a role, and cover some strategies to optimize health span. And then we will leave some time for some questions at the end. What is aging actually? There are so many mechanisms, so many variables, so many fascinating pathways by which the research is exploding. Here are just a few of the major fields of study by which we age. I'm really briefly going to touch on these. So inflammation, chronic inflammation rather than acute inflammation. Acute inflammation, when you fall, I fell a few weeks ago, and your whole body sends its army to go attack and protect and recover. This is very different. This is a low-grade chronic version of inflammation, which you can measure in your blood with C-reactive protein. It's considered the root cause of most disease. There's a term used now called inflammaging, and it leads to increased morbidity and mortality. Then there's oxidation. This is the accumulation of DNA damage that accelerates aging. This is why we've been talking about antioxidants for decades. mTOR is a protein that helps control several cell functions, including cell division and survival. It's strongly implicated in aging. We know that blocking mTOR can stop cancer cells. AMPK, or AMP activated protein kinase, is considered the master energy sensor, or the pro-longevity sensor, and it induces autophagy. Autophagy is a process by which a cell breaks down and destroys old, damaged, or abnormal proteins and other substances in its cytoplasm. Then there's the IGF-1/growth hormone pathway. IGF-1 is a key signal for cell growth regulation. We know that IGF-1 levels decline as we age, and we found that centenarians have lower IGF-1 levels, which is very interesting. Then there's cellular senescence, a state of stable cell cycle arrest in which proliferating cells become resistant to growth-promoting stimuli, typically in response to DNA damage. And finally, you may have heard about telomere attrition. This is the gradual loss of the protective caps that are found on our chromosomes that are caused by multiple types of stress exposures. Now, I'm not going to go into more detail on this, but if you haven't heard of this already, I'm sure many of you have, I can't recommend this book highly enough. Dr. Michael Greger's new tome, How Not to Age, it is absolutely magnificent. It dives deep into the mechanisms of aging and everything we're going to talk about here today about how we can promote Healthspan. And of course, he has 13,000 citations, so you could dive deep into all of the little microscopic areas that he talks about. But my favorite quote in this long and incredible tome is this: each year you are reborn. You destroy and create anew nearly your entire body weight in cells every year. About 50 billion of your cells die each day, but about 50 billion new cells are born. I love this quote because diet is the #1 cause of early death and disability in the world. This is the most empowering statistic. With all the unknowns and the chaos of life, the one thing you get to control is what you put on the end of your fork. And you are quite literally what you eat. We have this gorgeous symbiotic relationship with Earth, even as we breathe, exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide with the trees to mutually sustain life. Perhaps even more intimate is our relationship with food. We take food from the earth. Ideally, we don't manipulate it too far from its original form. We put it into our mouth. We chew it, digest it, metabolize it. We absorb what we need. We excrete what we don't. We save the molecules that we will use to reconfigure into parts and processes as needed, all in the spirit of regeneration. You are quite literally what you eat. So what is Healthspan? It's defined as the period of life spent in good health, free from chronic diseases and disabilities of aging. This is about adding life to your years, not just years to your life. It's about living longer, not just living longer. Health and our extraordinary bodies are multifactorial, so complex, in fact, that we are merely at the tip of the iceberg with respect to our comprehension of it. In John Reed's book, Succeeding, he says, when you first study a field, it seems like you have to memorize a zillion different things. You don't. What you need to identify are the 3 to 5 core principles that govern a field. The million things you thought you had to memorize are just various combinations of those core principles. This is how I felt when I began studying diet over 30 years ago. Everything was so complicated, and there were infinite concepts to learn and understand. But now, decades later, I stand firmly rooted in the truth that diet is actually quite simple. Allow me to explain. I've yet to hear a better summation of diet. Michael Pollan said it succinctly and perfectly well. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Let's break that down vis-a-vis optimizing Healthspan. We'll talk about quality of food, we'll talk about quantity, and then we'll finish up with some fine-tuning. In addition to Dr. Greger's brilliant tome, there's another great article summarizing dietary strategies for Healthspan. With all of the dietary patterns analyzed and via all the various mechanisms by which aging occurs, they all center on two primary things: plants and eating less. Many of you have heard about the blue zones, so I'm just going to briefly describe what they are if you haven't heard about them. Dan Buettner, a journalist for National Geographic, set out to better understand the role of lifestyle and environment and reverse engineer longevity. In association with the National Geographic, Tim and a team of demographers studied census data and identified 5 pockets around the world where people are living verifiably longer lives by a number of measurements. They found Icaria, Greece, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, and the only one here in the United States, which is right near me, is Loma Linda, California. And then a team of experts used established methodologies to try to determine why people had such remarkable longevity in these areas, which they dubbed the blue zones. The intent, Buettner explained, was to identify lessons or principles that could be applied to build healthier communities and to help people live longer and better lives. Note that in this Venn diagram, there was only one food that all the blue zones had in common: legumes. They threw together this idea of the power 9, the 9 things that they found in common amongst all of the blue zones. So I'll summarize them here. So one is to move naturally. It's not just sitting all day and then an hour hustling at the gym and then sitting all day. It's about moving throughout your day, being active, moving mindfully, those kind of things. Number 2, find your ikigai, which is what they say in Okinawa, and it means to find your purpose, or in the Nicoyan Peninsula, your plan de vida. You have to have a purpose. I love that. Number 3, stress leads to chronic inflammation. So they manage stress with things like praying, napping, happy hours. Number 4, which we'll talk about later, hara hachibu, which basically translates to 80% full. So back to eating less. Number 5, plant slant, or a plant-based diet. And the beans, all legumes, were the cornerstone of most centenarian diets. So legumes are, of course, lentils, beans, peas, hummus should be a food group, and tofu and tempeh as well. Meat was usually pork and eaten only on average about 5 times a month. It was a very rare serving. It wasn't like as far as cry from what we're doing these days around the world now. But yeah, it's been devolving, I should say. We're eating a lot more meat. Number 6 is wine at 5, and number 7 is to belong. So they have a lot of faith-based communities, social systems, they nourish connections, which leads to number 8, loved ones first. The successful centenarians in the blue zones put their families first. They have aging parents and grandparents living nearby or in the home, which also lowers disease and mortality rates for children in the home too. They commit to a life partner, which could add up to 3 years of life expectancy, and they invest in their children with time and love. Number 9 is called right tribe. Basically, these longest lived people chose or were born into social circles that supported their healthy behaviors. The Okinawans created moais, group of friends that committed to each other for life. And there's that research from the Framingham studies that show that smoking, obesity, happiness, and even loneliness are contagious. So those social networks are really helpful. You've likely heard that quote attributed to Jim Rohn: "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." So that's a good way to summarize lifestyle habits that help promote longevity. Diet is number 1. Diet is the most important intervention for the promotion of health and prevention of the great majority of age-associated chronic disease. You are what you eat. But again, you get to choose what you put on the end of your fork, bite after bite, meal after meal, day after day. Let's talk about diet quality. Pick proper packaging. This graph was created by T. Colin Campbell and was in the China study, and he let me reproduce it in the vegetarian diet because it's my favorite comparison between animal and plant food nutrients. It shows the most powerful nutritional argument for a plant-based diet because we started at the center, right? Protein, right? The P word, and about the same amount of protein. And then He took 500 calories of an equal combination of plant foods, namely tomatoes, spinach, lima beans, peas, and potatoes, a nice blend. And he compared it to 500 calories of an equal combo of animal products, beef, pork, chicken, and whole milk. So note that with the same amount of protein, there's equal amounts, but it shows that we could easily get adequate protein in a plant-based diet. But there's also 0 artery clogging cholesterols, 9 times the amount of fat in animals versus plants. And it's a saturated disease promoting type of fat found primarily in animals. There's 31 grams of disease fighting fiber in the plants, as well as thousands of disease fighting phytonutrients, which we'll talk about later, in the plants versus there is 0 fiber and 0 phytonutrients found in plants. There's 10 times more iron and the good non-heme kind that is not pro-oxidative, like the heme iron that's found in animals. There's twice as much calcium in the plants, thousands of times more of the antioxidant beta carotene in plants. Boom, nutrient adequacy, disease fighting capability in plants. It's basically what comes along packaged with the protein. What does a food look like overall? It's the two sides of the same coin. It's what you do eat and what you don't eat that proffers all of these benefits. We find in animal products saturated fats is the biggest source of saturated fats in the diet. Oxidized cholesterol, which is atherogenic. Heme iron, which is oxidizing. It boosts IGF-1 levels, which remember, IGF-1 levels are lower in centenarians. It has carnitine, which our body converts into TMAO. It's got bioconcentration of heavy metals, antibiotics, hormones, pesticides, herbicides. It has new 5-GC, which also promotes chronic inflammation. Also, we typically cook meat because eating it raw is undesirable if you don't like food poisoning. But cooking meat creates compounds such as heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which increase your cancer risk. There's advanced glycation end products known as AGEs, which are associated with oxidative damage and inflammation. Basically, all of these things impact most of the aging pathways that we know of. And on the other side of that coin are the two most health-promoting nutrients, fibers and phytonutrients. Basically, you want to eat a diet based on vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices in infinite tasty combinations. Or look at it like this as well. Try to eat the rainbow every day because the rainbow offers all the different phytonutrients. Like every color represents different nutrients. Phytonutrients are defined as naturally occurring biologically active substances that are found in plants. They're not essential for survival like vitamins and minerals are, but basically they're the compounds in plants that provide color and aroma and texture, but they also protect and nurture the plants. But then when we consume them, it also offers the same benefits to us, including all sorts of different mechanisms of action by which they help: anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, cardioprotective, all a million different mechanisms of action by which phytonutrients help us as humans. Some of the most loaded phytonutrient-rich foods include leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, and Brussels sprouts, blue and purple fruits like blueberries, blackberries, plums, and cherries, tomatoes, especially when it's cooked into tomato sauce and you get all that lycopene and all the really great decreased risk for prostate cancer and for eye health and immune function that you find in a tomato sauce. Garlic and onions are wonderful, citrus, flax seeds, soybeans, but the list goes on and on. When you eat a range of whole plant foods with lots of color, you're consuming a diverse and wide array of nutrient-dense, disease-fighting, healthspan promoting compounds. Any conversation about health would be remiss if we did not include the microbiome. As with most things in life, the more we learn about the microbiome, the more we know how much there is to know. We have approximately 100 trillion microorganisms, mostly bacteria, present in our human gastrointestinal tract. They are considered the master regulators of our immune system. Two of the most predominant phenomena in aging includes chronic low-grade inflammation, the inflammation we were talking about, and changes in the gut microbiota composition, which is called dysbiosis. So this is a great article, if you could see it tagged there, that delves deep into this fascinating microcosm. This illustration here shows the potential mechanisms by which probiotics, resistant starch, and resistant proteins contribute to the mitigation of aging-related chronic low-grade inflammation by producing short-chain fatty acids, but we're not going to go too far into that. This is a great article on short-chain fatty acids, basically just different types of fuels for happy, healthy bacteria. Did you know that your microbiome is constantly changing based not only on diet, but also exercise and travel, who you're around, so many other variables? It's so fascinating. The microbiome influences each hallmark of aging in many complex pathways, many of which are still not well understood at all. The authors of this article right here, they propose that we view the host and its microbiota as a single biological entity whose aging phenotype is influenced by the complex interplay between host and bacterial genetics, considering the pivotal role of the microbiota in host health and metabolism. Here's an illustration of the various mechanisms by which aging may activate inflammatory pathways. Outcomes of feeding your microbiome, well, fiber basically, include reducing systemic inflammation, which is a strong risk factor for premature mortality, morbidity, frailty, and infections. So this illustration shows the various mechanisms by which aging may activate the inflammatory pathways. Very complex. But simply stated, fiber leads to increased healthy bacteria and decreased pathogenic bacteria, which leads to positive systemic health outcomes. So let's be more accurate with what I said originally. You are what you eat, but really you are what your gut microbiota eat. So feed them well. Instead of happy wife, happy life, it's more like happy bacteria, happy vita. And we have to talk about processed foods. The US diet is now about 60% ultra processed, and that's defined as industrially manufactured, ready-to-eat/heat formulations that are made with multiple additives and largely devoid of whole foods. It is considered the key driver of the global rise in chronic diet-related diseases. It's because of a lot of reasons, including that it's deficient in fiber and nutrients, and because it's high in sodium and sugar. Again, the two sides of the same coin. So processed foods and animal products are two peas in a pod for things we want to reduce. Instead, we want to focus back on this whole food plant-based diet: vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices in infinite tasty combinations. I like to talk about how to prioritize this with my mnemonic called the 6 Daily Threes. These are foods that offer unique nutritional properties that support all of these mechanisms that we've been talking about: anti-inflammatory, nutrient dense, health span promoting, so many different mechanisms of action by which these foods are like the quintessential necessities in the diet. So you want to start with having 3 servings of these 6 things: leafy green and cruciferous vegetables, and 1 serving is 1 cup raw or half a cup cooked. And then 3 servings of the other colored veggies, because all the different phytonutrients in the reds, oranges, yellows, whites, blues, purples, all of those are different and wonderful as well. 3 servings of fruits, 3 servings of nuts and seeds, which is basically 1 to 2 ounces or 30 to 40 grams a day. We'll talk a little bit about that more later. 3 servings of legumes, which is about 1.5 cups of any kind of bean, pea, lentil, hummus, or soy food. And then I added mushrooms to this group because, again, very unique properties found in mushrooms, very health promoting. But the goal for mushrooms is basically 3 different species a week to get all of the immune enhancing benefits. And then once you have that in your diet, I've calculated in many, many ways through nutritional software. It's about 800, 900 calories. So it's a really good baseline for your day. Then you could add everything else, right? Then you could add more whole grains, or you could add more of any of these things, or you could, substantiate with other foods that you love in your life. But these are the things that you really want to prioritize to make sure you're getting this cascade, this complement of nutrients. Now let's talk about diet quantity. Benjamin Franklin said, "To lengthen thy life, lessen thy meals." Using dietary restriction without malnutrition, yeasts, worms, flies, mice, and monkeys have demonstrated an increase of lifespan and health span. Restriction of the diet by 30 to 40% of ad libitum feeding can increase lifespan up to 50%. In higher level mammals using dietary restriction, we see protection against cancer, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, cardiovascular disease, and protection against neurodegeneration. The short-term human trials demonstrate many of the same early biomarkers seen in other organisms. Our bodies are harmoniously tied to circadian rhythms. So eating less is really easy to sync up to our clocks. We do better at different times of day. It's optimal to not eat 3 hours before bedtime. So there's a lot of different ways to eat less or to restrict your meals per se, or to eat less, as we're talking about as one of the benefits. You achieve comparable benefits to the extraordinary things you've heard about fasting by implementing a daily break from being in the fed state. So remember that from your very last swallow, you still are digesting and absorbing for up to 4 to 6 hours. So you're still not in the fasted state until after that period of time. So that's important to consider when you're planning your feeding window. So many of you have heard of time restricted eating or intermittent fasting. There's so many ways to do this, and there's no really right or wrong way. Ideally, to keep it super simple, because that's what I really want to do today, it's you want to think about being in the fasted state for a period of time. Ideally, you could hack hunger by sticking to the same times every day. So if you eat at the same time every day, you'll be hungry at the same time every day. And that's something I use with my clients. So when I'm having people going on weight loss programs or just changing their diet, I just have them choose 2 times that they could eat or 3 times that they could eat every single day around the same time. And then they're not hungry throughout the day because the body just it loops right in. The circadian clock ties right in. But there's, alternate day fasting. There's 18-6, 18 hours fasted, 6 eating, or vice versa. There's 12-12, there's 24. It doesn't really matter. I think a lot of the evidence shows at least 12 hours in the fasted state, and it's really easy to do if you just kind of lump that onto your sleep cycle. So you could also implement this at each meal rather than your overall pattern. You could think about it at each meal. Harahachibu. So this is the Okinawan statement. It's a 2,500-year-old Confucian mantra said before meals, reminding them to stop eating when their stomachs are 80% full. This 20% gap between not being hungry and feeling full really could be the difference between losing weight or gaining it. It's that close, right? You need, especially if you're trying to lose weight. I know we're not talking about losing weight, but if you are trying to lose weight, you really need to create enough of a deficit so that your body goes into body fat storage. So this is a really easy, painless way to do that if you're considering that regularly. Now, the question is, what is 80% full? And so what I have my clients do is just check in throughout the day, because this is very, very subjective. So in the first thing in the morning, on a scale of 1 to 10, what are you? Right before you eat, what on the scale of 1 to 10? In the middle of your meal, stop your meal, stop eating, and then check in. How are you feeling? So just getting a feel for how you are in the day is really helpful, and something that we don't normally do because we are socialized into eating a certain way. Eat every 2 hours, eat, this meal and that. Everyone's telling us how much and when and why and what to eat, but really our bodies are the master. It knows everything. And this is a really wonderful mindfulness practice that I highly recommend you try if you haven't already. All right, fine tuning. Here are some things you can do to optimize your health span besides eat plants and eat less. Do maintain a healthy weight. That is important for morbidity mortality. Do try to have 10 servings a day of fruits and vegetables. Everyone pretty much agrees on that parameter. Do drink tea and coffee if you like it. It's really healthy. There's a lot more good evidence just keeps pouring out there. It's really good news for those tea and coffee lovers. And just stay hydrated in general. Eat nuts and seeds, 1 to 2 ounces or 30 to 40 grams a day. Polyphenols, those wonderful plant compounds that are really health promoting. And then herbs and spices, which is just a delicious way to make everything taste even more delicious. And then you're adding nutrients, calorie-free nutrition. So it's like getting a little extra boost. And avoid sugary beverages and reduce sodium. Ideally, I know it's not so easy, but ideally, and according to the American Heart Association, I still recommend keeping it under 1,500 milligrams a day. Not that I recommend anyone counts, but let's talk about weight really quickly. I use a Hamwe formula to estimate your healthy weight. And that's basically like if a male is 106 pounds for the first 5 feet, and then 6 pounds for each additional inch, or a female 100 pounds for the first 5 feet, and then 5 pounds for each additional inch. So for a 5'4" woman, it's 120 pounds, but then there's plus or minus 10%. It's actually there's a lot of wiggle room there, but that's how you estimate your healthy body weight. 10 servings of vegetables and fruits a day. So that basically the conclusion in the study, the big groundbreaking study that everyone's been using ever since, what year was that? 2017, 500 to 800 grams a day. So 7 to 10 servings again. It's associated with a reduced risk for cardiovascular disease, cancer, all-cause mortality. And one serving is 1 cup raw, half a cup cooked, or 1 medium piece of fruit. And all this stuff, that 6 daily threes and everything, is on my website, healthspandietitian.com. And you could find all the details of the servings and the different types of food, just so you have a visual for you, because it kind of helps. But collectively, these gems contain fiber and those amino acids, the P word, essential fatty acids, and they're exceptionally high in folate and vitamin C, E, K1, vitamin K1, which is phylloquinone, minerals like calcium, magnesium, iron, potassium, phosphorus, and zinc, as well as phytonutrients like chlorophyll, provitamin A carotenoids, and flavonoids, anthocyanins, coumarins, terpenes, phytosterols, and more. On beverages, prioritize water. Okay, this is the, however, everyone always asks, how much water should I drink? And I go by all the guidelines. I think it's ACSM, but you've probably heard this before, that whatever your weight is in pounds, have it and drink that in ounces. But what I learned in graduate school that made me never want to drink these drinks ever again in my life because it was so gross, but it's very visual, is that you want your urine to look like lemonade, not apple juice. Ugh, I can't drink lemonade or apple juice ever again, but that's okay because that's a sugary beverage anyway. And that leads us to our next one: avoid sugary beverages. And drink coffee and tea if you like it. They have those polyphenols, they have anti-inflammatory, antioxidant effects. So many people are so happy to hear about that. And there's been a lot of good news on that lately, so it's just getting better and better. Nuts and seeds. So people who consume nuts and seeds regularly tend to maintain their lower body mass indexes and less body fat, have less body fat. These foods are loaded with essential fats, phytosterols, lignans, ellagic acid, like unique nutritional components that you can't really find elsewhere in these doses. Trace minerals, vitamins. So there's massive evidence that consuming 1 to 2 ounces or 30 to 60 grams a day promotes cardiometabolic health, and also protects against type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, obesity, macular degeneration, and cholelithiasis. And you can see kind of some of the mechanisms of action in that picture. Polyphenols, to define them, they're basically a group of thousands of phytonutrients found in many plant foods. These include flavonoids, lignans, phenolic acids. They're especially high, again, in tea and coffee, berries, avocado, nuts, seeds, and herbs and spices such as turmeric, ginger, and garlic. Finally, but importantly, we need to be mindful about sodium. It is the #1 dietary risk factor for death. It is pro-inflammatory and increases blood pressure and the risk for hypertension. This goes back to the primary argument against ultra-processed foods. 75% of US sodium consumption comes from these products. But remember that your palate shifts. I've been working with clients for over 20 years now, and I see it every time, and I've experienced it myself. The less salt you eat, the more you'll taste it. And it takes time to shift, but it happens relatively fast. And if you really stick to it, you'll learn to notice the subtle but very distinctive saltiness found in natural foods like celery. Consider the crazy fact that 2 slices of bread to make a sandwich contain more sodium than a bag of potato chips. Doesn't seem possible, but here's why. The bread has the salt baked into it, whereas the potato chips are fried and therefore saturated with oil, and salt doesn't dissolve in the oil, so it sits on the surface and it hits your tongue just as the chip touches. So we could use this to our advantage. If you really want more salt in your meal in any way, shape, or form, save it for last. Add it at the end. You won't miss the stuff that you cook in. One last piece to consider when we're talking about a Healthspan optimizing diet, and that is mindfulness. In my last book, The Choose You Now Diet, I summarized how I've guided thousands of clients and students to lose weight of 0.4 to 0.8 pounds a day, to reduce or get off their medications, to enhance their performance and recovery, and to improve the overall health. I incorporate these 3 elements. I use a whole food plant-based diet, time-restricted eating, and definitely mindfulness. We are human after all. And the most challenging part of transitioning your diet is almost always the psychosocial environment. No matter how strong you are and how much you know and how much you're wanting to do this, there are so many factors that get in the way. We live in what I like to call a modern day trifecta of overabundance, this biological mismatch to our environment. We have not yet adapted to this lifestyle, and our health span pays the price. So you have to stand in your truth in the face of adversity and constant temptation, but it is so worth it. So let's put it into terms of deliciousness, because that's where it all begins. Those infinite tasty combinations. You have to love your food, as this is the cornerstone for health. But nowadays, there are infinite ways to find your new favorite foods. Let's go back to less is more. Edward Tufte said, "Clutter and confusion are failures of design, not attributes of information." There is no such thing as a perfect diet. It doesn't exist. If you keep it about curiosity and conscientiousness, that will lead you to success. Every choice matters. Each choice can lead to a cascade of choices that can ultimately lead to optimal health span. You are quite literally what you eat, and you get to decide what you put into that magnificent body of yours. I wish for you to have not only more years in your life, but also so much love and life in your years. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much. That was a brilliant tour de force presentation. I'm
Thank
sure our
you.
audience loved it as much as I did. So, and we have Deborah Kelly, our nurse practitioner, who will be helping us field questions. So, yeah, that was really spectacular. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Got it in on time too.
And you did very well. And you didn't even talk fast. It was
Yay.
brilliant.
That's a
Yay.
good
Yeah.
day.
It's a good day. So, Nurse Kelly, what questions would you like to start with?
Well, our first question came up regarding fish. What are the thoughts about fish, such as salmon?
So the research on fish seemed to be so amazing, but it's kind of up and down and in and out. And I think what's happening now is that, unfortunately, tragically, our oceans are our dumping grounds, and we are collecting all sorts of toxins. And we're including, now microplastics and nanoplastics that are aggregating in our oceans, and then the fish are eating them, and then it becomes concentrated, and then we're eating that. So because of those, DDT, dioxin, PCBs, all the mercury, all of those things, it is more risky than it ever was. So even though omega-3 fats that are found in salmon and other fish are so health promoting, this is something to be considering. So it's something you need to be considerate of. If you are eating it once in a while, go check your mercury and make sure your mercury levels are okay. But you do want to minimize your fish consumption.
And can I do a follow-on, because so many people are told about the importance of fish for those omega-3s and all of that. Would you follow on with that about people and healthy sources of those?
Yeah, so we can get some omega-3s from a source called ALA, alpha linolenic acid, in the plant-based diet. So you get that from flaxseed, chia seed, hemp seed, walnuts, soy foods like tofu has it, and we can convert some of that from ALA into EPA and then DHA, and there's all these different intermediaries in between. However, vegans don't have the same amount of the longer chain, the EPA and DHA, in our bloodstream as do fish eaters. So that's been the question. And so all of us now, we've all kind of talked, a lot of us healthcare providers have kind of come to this. We all recommend a microalgae supplement for anyone on a plant-based diet. So I recommend taking a EPA and DHA formula where you're getting the long chain and consuming the foods that are rich in ALA. So you're getting kind of the best of all three sources.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. The next question was, can you say more about avoiding sugary beverages, and how do you explain that to clients? Folks become confused by low glycemic diet information versus the idea of sugar and sugary beverages.
I'm not sure I understand the question. I don't recommend sugary beverages. I don't think it has to do with it's a pure sugar, right? That's like a refined sugar. And it's liquid. So it goes like directly into your bloodstream. And it's like, it's a massive dose of sugar. And we know how, disease causing and promoting sugar is in so many different ways. So definitely that's the main reason, is just you're eliminating sugar and processed foods, and that's just, it's pure sugar and
And,
chemicals, whatever
and it
else.
seems like the second part of that was like low glycemic. So if we're eliminating those refined sugars, we're automatically making it a lower glycemic.
It's not about the glycemic index that makes sugary beverages so risky, because, you know, we could argue all sorts of things about glycemic index and glycemic load, but the main thing is that you're drinking refined sugar, and it's going directly into your bloodstream. And, you know, and also just one side effect is it's a ton of calorie, and you're just consuming extra calorie. And most of us are trying not to consume so much calorie, and without any satiety, there's no fiber, there's no nutrients. It's basically like well, empty calories at best, but really it's a harmful substance at worst, and realistically.
Thank you.
What about for the sugary beverages which are with artificial sweeteners instead of, so there's no calories? What do you say to those?
I know. So this is such a good question. So I've always said, even before there's been a lot of evidence, there's interesting evidence on artificial sweeteners. And I include stevia and all of it, monk fruit, all of it, the non-caloric sweetener, non-nutritive sweeteners, I put them all in the same category. Because again, I work with a lot of clients that are trying to lose weight. Most of my clients come to me to help them lose weight. And most people are struggling with what they call sugar addiction, or just like these cravings for sweet. And you could have these and you're saving all the calories, but these compounds are designed or naturally found as hundreds to thousands of times sweeter than table sugar. And so it elevates your palate. I was talking about the palate shifts with salt, same with sugar. So if you're having things that are multiple times sweeter than sugar, it just keeps the brain thinking sweet, sweet, sweet. And I found it's almost impossible for my clients to eliminate their sugar cravings when they're still consuming diet soda or those, you know, Splenda packets or even stevia or any of that stuff. Now, but there's some newer evidence that's showing that it's problematic because it disrupts the microbiome. And again, we're learning so much about the microbiome. It is so fascinating. And there's another mechanism. So if it's disrupting, if it's causing any kind of dysbiosis, or maybe just, you know, creating the more pathogenic bacteria, you know, that's a good reason in and of itself to not consume them. So it's like I always say, compared to what is a question not asked often enough. So compared to a sugary soda, yes, have the diet soda. Compared to a green tea, have the green tea without anything in it, you know, try to get used to it. But you really will adjust, your palate will really adjust. Like I really had to adjust to go from like creamy, sweet coffees in the morning that I grew up with to drinking them black. It's not the same. It's not the same. But I've learned that I like to have a mug and I like to make it and I like the smell of it. I like to sip it and have something warm on my hands all day. So you get about like 80% of the experience, and you still get the phytonutrients and all that. It's just not the same, but it really does take time to adjust. And now I actually look forward to my, you know, black coffee or Americanos or whatever like that. So it's an adjustment period, and compared to what is a question not asked often enough. That's one way to think about it.
Very cool. Yeah, that's how we always answer that question. And actually, I had my black coffee story is pretty much like yours. It took me a while to get used to not putting anything in my coffee, and now I can't stand it if there is something in it. Is that right? You know, taste buds change. All right,
Yes.
back to you, Nurse Kiali. What do we have?
Okay, someone with diverticulitis, but I guess at that time that would be a flare, needing to exclude nuts and seeds due to, I guess, that flare, and asking about the nuts finely ground versus just chewing them.
Oh,
So
well, that's a great question for your doctor, depending on which stage of inflammation you're at, because it can irritate it. But that's, again, not the cause of the diverticulosis. It's just aggravating something that's already happened from a low fiber diet. So if you're in the throes of something, definitely ask your doctor and listen carefully to your body and be really careful with that. It could be fine, or nut butters, something like that. But I would definitely ask your physician for specific guidance, depending on where you are in your current state.
there's so much misinformation about, oh, how many times I've heard, I have diverticulosis, so I can't eat corn, I can't eat nuts. Could you comment on those foods and how you said that they're really not the cause of those problems or those flares oftentimes?
Well, right. So like a health promoting diet, you reduce your risk for diverticulosis, diverticulitis, and multiple GI problems, including like IBD. And so it's a helpful thing to start out eating a health promoting diet, lots of fiber, you're not going to have that problem going in. But then once it happens, now you're managing symptoms. So it becomes a whole different ball game. So you have to get the symptoms down and change your diet accordingly. And then once you got the flare going away, which my clients get to that point, then we start introducing those kind of slowly and strategically, so you can have all those foods back in your diet eventually, and then heal, so you don't even have the underlying condition anymore. That's the beautiful thing about a plant-based diet, is you could heal the underlying inflammation that's causing the problems in the first place, and reverse it from happening.
Yeah, and actually, Nurse Kelly is an expert on this as well. So, because you used to work in GI, right? So, what are your thoughts, Deborah, about that?
I saw an awful lot of that also, Juliana, and people to a T came in saying, okay, well, I don't have, they didn't have the active flares, but they have diverticulosis in this whole long list of foods, wonderful plant foods. I can't eat them. My doctor told me I can't eat all those foods, but actually they weren't having flares, and we would start gradually introducing them and they would do well. And we talked about the fact that they're actually really wonderful, healthy foods that we want to be eating. So,
Yeah. Thank you. I agree with that. Okay, what's next?
okay, next up is about vitamin B12. Wanting
What
to
about
just ask about that. They are asking, have you mentioned B12? And
I
what
didn't talk about it today, but it is so important. And if you're on a plant-based diet, or anyone over the age of 50 needs to be supplementing with vitamin B12. It is, there's the most safe, effective, inexpensive way to avoid neurological breakdown. Like, you could have all sorts of problems irreversibly, so if you're not having B12. And there's a lot of misinformation about B12 out there. You don't want to rely on getting it from fortified foods, because that's not really reliable. You just want to take a supplement, because you know the dose, you can control it. And I always call B12 the most finicky vitamin with an attitude problem, because it has a really crazy logarithmic absorption curve. It has, it stays in the body for a long time, so you won't even notice it in the blood work for a while. There's a lag effect. It's such a complicated nutrient. It just got such an attitude, but it's so easy to take care of it and prevent any problems, because if you take it in, your body will excrete any excess. And I use the logarithmic curve to do my recommendations. And I have this on my website, healthspandietitian.com. Someone asked about that too. If you just type in B12, I have the exact numbers, but you could take 50 micrograms twice a day, 150 micrograms once a day, or if you like to take less pills, like most of us, you want to take like 2,000 or 2,500 micrograms once a week. And that's it. And then you could avoid problems. And I've had this happen once where I've read and seen it, and I've heard about stories, but I had one client who was always like, take your pills, take your supplements, take your supplements. And she's like, I don't like pills. I don't like pills. Well, a year after working with me, she calls and she's like, yeah, I felt like my face went numb and they thought I had MS. And I said, please go run and get a B12 shot right now. And she was so lucky, because it was a B12 deficiency. And it's because she wasn't taking the supplements. And it's the only time I've ever had that, because I beat this into my clients, like, don't forget your B12. It's so important, and it's so easy to avoid a problem. So definitely B12 is very important. And after the age of 50, no matter how much meat you're eating, we stop producing intrinsic factor the way we do. It starts to slow down, and you need intrinsic factor, again, for that crazy picky attitude problem vitamin to absorb. And so if you're not putting it out there, it doesn't matter how much you're taking in, you're not going to absorb it. So that's why we take it in a supplement form, and very, very important, very, very safe. And again, water soluble, you will just excrete the excess. I don't know if there's any cases yet of a B12 toxicity, because it's so water soluble and just excrete it. Not that you should test the boundaries, but very easy to just take care of it and avoid problems.
Thank you. Next up is a question about having difficulty hitting that 10 servings of fruits and vegetables within the 2 meals per day. Recommendations about packing them in.
I love this question. I'm doing a series on my Instagram and Facebook and everything. So if you follow me, Julieanna Hever on Instagram, or Plant-Based Dietitian on Facebook, and YouTube, I'm on YouTube, wherever I am, I'm posting these videos, because I want to make this so easy. It's not that hard. It sounds crazy, 7 to 10 servings. Okay, so if you have a big salad, that's like, I don't know, 3 or 4 cups of vegetables, that's 4 servings, okay? Then you have like a piece of fruit. That's another serving. And then you have for your next meal, you have some cooked veggies, and cooked veggies you can get a lot more in, right? So you have like, let's say a cup and a half of cooked, like today for in my big salad I had today for lunch, I also had some cooked broccoli in there. So I got, I don't know, I probably had 8 servings of vegetables just at my first meal or more. And then, so cooked vegetables is a great way to do it. Fruit a couple times a day, easy. It's really easy. And I'm doing these videos because you get the visual, like right now it's hard to describe it, but it's really not that much food. You know, I'll make a soup or chili on the side, like a little bowl of soup or chili that's loaded with veggies. Melt, and I always, not melt, but I blanch greens in everything. I serve everything on a bed of greens. So if I'm making pasta, like for my kids, I used to always throw in greens or broccoli and at the end, and it wilts, and it's just like, you can get so much in there. Like, look at you, you take a huge thing of kale and just like that. And it's so easy to get it in there. So include cooked, and don't be afraid of cooked, include raw, and do it, you know, eat everything on a big bed of vegetables and have some fruits. It's so much easier than you think.
A follow on that. Any thoughts about smoothies? There are some differing thoughts about smoothies.
Oh my gosh, when I started this, like, I don't know, whenever social media started, I was doing those videos like, look how big my smoothie is, you know, and I was blending them. I was like so proud of myself drinking like a gallon of smoothie every day. And then I realized, well, first of all, let me say this. It's a gateway for people that are veggie fearful, like veggie phobic. And I see those all the time with my clients. A lot of people that are like, I don't eat greens. It's too bitter. I can't. Well, you could throw it in a smoothie, add a banana or add some fruit, and you don't even taste the bitter. So it's a great gateway food for people that are not comfortable with their greens. That said, I also, again, I work with most of my clients are trying to lose weight, and it's a great and easy way to get a lot of calories in and with very little satiety because it's pre-digested for you. It's already blended. You don't have to do any of the work. And so I remember drinking this like literally tub of smoothie, and a couple of hours later was hungry, and I couldn't figure out how that's possible because I calculated, you know, 700 calories or 800. It's an enormous amount of calories for a very little satiety value. Very nutritionally dense. So when my clients are trying to gain weight or they can't get enough calories in a day, like I work with a lot of elite athletes, I work with a lot of elderly clients that are struggling with dentition or other, or just appetite, I have them add a smoothie. But for the majority of people, it's better to chew your food.
Thank you. Could you explain a little more about polyphenols?
So they're just phytonutrients, and they're found in all those plant foods that I was talking about, and they're wonderful health promoting, and they're related to Healthspan, and they're related to decreasing those mechanisms of action by which aging occurs. Back to the same old visuals, those same foods that I was talking about, the nuts and seeds, the, you know, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. There's a lot of those found in a lot of phytosterols found in them.
Thank
So
you.
we're doing really well with time, Julia. This is amazing, and we still have some time left. So I'm actually going to share my screen just briefly as a reminder to other people about Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute. These are some programs that you can learn about if you go to rochesterlifestylemedicine.org. The first 2, Jumpstart Program and the Lift Project, are certified by the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And also, we are a nonprofit. My wife and I are full-time volunteers, but we do have 6 or 7 full-time employees, and that's how we continue to operate, is through your generosity. So with that, and if Bob could just put the link in the chat, that would be great. And with that shameless plug over, I will go back to answering questions. There was actually a really interesting question, I thought. So Allison Burns asks, wine turns into sugar, yet it is in the blue zones. Thoughts about wine and the blue zones? Why is it wine at 5?
Right. I think I've thought a lot about this. I love wine, you know, too. And it's like a lot of people love wine, but like it's not a health food. We know that it's toxic to every cell in the body. It causes cancer. We know it's not a health food per se. So I've thought a lot about this. I wrote about this in Vegetarian Diet because, you know, when you think about the Mediterranean diet, you think, oh, it's healthy because of fish and olive oil and red wine. Well, it's not. It's healthy in spite of those things, not because of those things. And I think one of the reasons it's, you know, wine at 5 or whatever is it's a social thing. I'm at 5 o'clock, we're sitting down and we're relaxing, and we're stress management thing is we're sitting and socializing. So there's all the other elements that have to do with the blue zones. And I think that's why it's included in there. You can include it in a healthy diet. You can keep some alcohol in and be fine with it once in a while. But it's, you know, it's not a health food. It's like compared to what is a question not asked often enough, and how is it introduced? And you don't need wine to be healthy. That's for sure. We know that for
Right.
sure. And it's a hard question because a lot of people want to, want to hear good news about, as McDougall says, want to hear good news about the bad habits. But I don't think it's because of the wine that the blue zones are healthy. It's from what I understand, it's the ceremony about it, the how it plays out, what it represents. And yeah, I think that's what I concluded from what I understand.
We'll go with that. So everybody, you heard that. You heard it here. Julieanna Hever says it's the Mediterranean diet is healthy in spite of the wine. Yeah. So, okay. What else do we, there was a question about microbiome. Oh, here. What are your thoughts about taking probiotics to improve the microbiome, or is eating fiber sufficient?
It's such a good question. And again, we're at the tip of the iceberg about what we understand about the microbiome. I think the best way to sum it up, and I saw this great review article that basically concluded with the idea that if you're lucky to find the right probiotics, then great. I don't think they're necessarily harmful, unless I've heard some harm associated when taking it with an antibiotic at the same time. But I think it's just really hard to find, like, think about it. There's like, these formulas have many different bacteria, and they have many different, doses and what is it, the colony forming units, CFUs of those different combinations. And have they died from heat, or, there's so many things that come into play. So like, I don't know. The answer is we don't know. We really don't know. But most importantly is you're feeding the bacteria well with the prebiotics. And that's why fiber is so crucial, and multiple types of fiber. So if you find a probiotic, it's what I tell my clients, that works, great, by all means. Because I've had clients tell me, oh, all of a sudden I'm, more regular, or I feel better. Great, use it. Even if it's a placebo effect, if it's working, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I don't think there's this is the best probiotic, or you need to take probiotics. I don't think anyone can conclude that at this time.
Yeah, thanks. I second that. All right, we have time for one more question.
Dr. Veggie, you picking that one?
I'm going to pick that one. Let's see. This one's depressing, so I don't want to ask that one. Well, I'll ask it anyway. Are the same toxins that affect the fish also found in the soil where our plants grow?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. It's really okay. So yes, they are. There's toxins everywhere. And many, many years ago, I was making these magnets with these, I was making these visuals to get out there before we had memes and all that stuff. And so one of them I did was a bucket, because I learned this from an immunologist when I was a kid, is that we are flooded with toxins. There's toxins in our air, our water, our food. There's toxins everywhere. This is where we live. This is our life. This is our planet, unfortunately, tragically. However, so that bucket theory is that, like, you want to just like try to keep your bucket from flowing over. And that means try to limit your exposure to them. So the benefit of eating plants versus animals is that the plants have some of them, but what the animals do is bioaccumulate them, right? Animals are consuming them, and then it's accumulating into the flesh, which is what people eat, and then they're getting more of it. So that's a positive spin on that. Yes, it is there, but you're getting less of it if you're doing it directly versus higher up on the food chain, and you're eating the animal that ate the plant that had all the toxins in it.
Well, thank you for that. Okay, so that was a little depressing. Can you say something really positive before we end? What's your final message for our audience tonight?
Oh, okay. My final message is, again, you don't have to be perfect. There is literally no such thing as a perfect diet. It doesn't exist. So find foods you love. Focus on the 6 daily threes: leafy green vegetables, cruciferous vegetables, other colored veggies, fruits. Make sure you're getting your legumes, your nuts and seeds, your mushrooms, you're enjoying your food, because most important is that you're eating foods you love, so it's sustainable. But everyone could do this. Everyone could eat more plants. Don't try to be perfect, and enjoy every single bite.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for for generously sharing your time with us, and that wonderful presentation, which I understand was the first time you gave it, or the second time maybe. So yeah, okay, fantastic. And the timing was awesome. And so thank you, Deborah, for joining us and helping out. And thank you, Bob, in the background, for being such a great engineer. And thank you to our audience for your wonderful questions and for joining us tonight. So until next time, good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Everyone. Thank you.